We figured this out. We're only 4 minutes late. That's my fault. This episode is all about how to recognize when somebody who is trying to persuade you is trying to manipulate you. How to recognize when you're being manipulated or gaslit more than just persuasion. It's an interesting subject that, as a Gemini and as an attorney, I love dialogue. I love negotiation. My son is a Gemini moon. Negotiation is like breathing to him. So this is a topic that I think a lot about and I love speaking on. And we are, as always, with our resident intuitive, Amy Strauss, here to weigh in on this topic and to give us a collective reading from her guides. I'm very excited. Thanks for coming again, Amy.
Of course. Thank you for having me on. Yay.
Absolutely. And if you don't know me, I'm Maria Rieger, your resident Gemini, and this is Positive Parenting with Astrology. So I'm going to try to keep this session focused. And if you guys have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I will be checking periodically to see if you guys have any questions that we can address. So yeah, I'm going to try to keep this conversation focused on my end because otherwise I'll just go off on tangents and whatnot. So let me start with, I have a question for you. And I think that maybe the way you handle this as a parent may be different because for me, because of your energy, you're a Capricorn sun. So your daughter, when she tries to like negotiate with you after you've given her like a directive, how do you handle that? Do you let her say her piece? Do you shut it down and say, hey, we already talked about this. I'm not hearing about this subject. Like, how do you, and obviously this may be heavily context dependent, but how do you deal with that as a parent? Like, what's your default reaction? We lost Amy, but she's coming back. All right. So if you guys are like me, this is a subject that you may think a lot about in your reparenting journey because you may be very susceptible to pressure. You may be a people pleaser, and you may not recognize when people are actively trying to manipulate you and gaslight you. And if you were not given good guidance regarding boundaries and how to protect yourself as a child, this is likely going to be a problem for you as an adult. It was for me. I didn't realize when people were being intentionally deceitful and intentionally deceptive and intentionally trying to gaslight me. And I think as parents, we definitely want to protect our kids from this. We want to guide our kids so that they can recognize people's attempts to manipulate them when they're adults. Well, we're not always around to help them and guide them. So while we're waiting for Amy, hold on. Okay. So while we're waiting for Amy to log back in and join us, I wanted to share with you. So I started thinking about this a while ago. I read a great book called The Narcissists Playbook by Dana Morningstar, which is, it's a good look into how the narcissist thinks, how they handle relationships, and to predict what the narcissist is most likely going to do when you stand up for yourself and have boundaries and things like this. And Dana Morningstar had a definition of manipulation in the book, which was when somebody convinces somebody else to do something against their own best interest. So when somebody convinces you to do something against your own best interest, I think that's a really good way of looking at it. I think it's a little too general. I actually posed that question to my son, and I asked him, like, how would you characterize manipulation? Like, how would you what's the difference between persuasion and manipulation? Like, when does persuasion become something dark, something that we would call manipulation? Hello, I've been talking solo.
I've been
How are you
watching,
doing?
so I could anyway,
Okay,
I'm on my
cool.
phone, but I've watched I've actually was
Okay.
able to watch. You couldn't hear me, but I watched the whole thing.
Okay.
So it's funny. The pause was good because it allowed me to think about what the real, I'm like, oh, I can answer her question the way I think that I want to answer it. But then I went on pause and it's like, no, you should just be honest. So honestly, I just shut that shit down. I'm a Capricorn. I don't have time for this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do I want to be the parent that listens and it's like, I really appreciate you to go
Yeah.
of course I want to be that parent, but I'm absolutely not. I have a schedule to run. I got places to be. I broke no opposition. I just don't. And she's a Capricorn child.
Yeah.
So it tends to work. If I
Yeah.
had a child with a different natal chart, it absolutely would. My husband's a Sagittarius.
Good luck.
It just doesn't work. It just absolutely doesn't work. You've never met more of a rebel in the zodiac than someone with strong Sag placements. So I have to be careful about that with my daughter because she is such a rule follower like me that she'll just okay, and then I'm like, wait, I don't want you to be compliant either. That's not a great skill. I don't think that's you don't want that for your children. You want it to a degree, but you don't want it to overwhelm your life with each other,
I appreciate your honesty on that because and I think that's a lot of parents, they're tempted to do that. And that's how, and I'm not saying that that's a wrong approach. That's a Capricorn approach. And I think certainly there are times that it's appropriate to be like, this has been discussed. This has been decided. I'm not brooking this. I'm not talking about this.
Yeah.
Right. I think, and that's, and I think there's definitely a way to, like you said, teach her to stand up for herself. That's going to be the challenge, right? And Cap is an energy that respects authority, but I have noticed they respect competent authority. When authority is incompetent, Cap is like, this is ridiculous. I am not putting up with this BS.
I agree.
So I don't think of Cap, and again, we're talking about in the purest sense of the energy, right? I don't think Cap is a compliant energy. They respect authority as long as authority is competent, and authority is not trying to manipulate them to kind of tie it into our subject today. I think that's accurate. So I think it works because your energies are so similar.
Yes.
And so I parent very differently. And I would love to do something if my kid just did it. I would love that. The part of me that is reparenting from complex PTSD and is easily triggered would love that. However, my son, as you all know, is a Scorpio sun with a Gemini moon. Negotiation is like breathing to him. So he's always wheeling and dealing. So the way I handle that, because I can tend to be inconsistent as a Gemini, I know that about myself, inconsistent parent. The way I deal with that is I have certain rules. These are, no bargain. I'm not negotiating on these. These are the rules, right? And I have a Cap moon, so I'm okay with rules if they make sense, but they have to make sense. And the rules are usually for health, safety, screens go off at a certain time of the night because this is about sleep hygiene, right? That's the rule. It's not because I want to be a mean mom. It's because sleep hygiene, right? Here are the parameters. Those are the rules. Almost everything else is up for negotiation. Although I will say, if I don't feel like wheeling and dealing on something, I will tell him, I'm not talking about this right now. And if you continue to pressure me on this, you're not going to get the response you want. It's going to be no. If you stop pressuring me and you give me 48 hours to think about this, I may have a different response. But if you're going to be pressuring me, then the answer is no. And I want to talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about that now since it naturally came up in conversation. So I don't necessarily think that is manipulation. Like when a kid repeatedly asks you the same question in the hopes of getting a different answer. My son does that a lot. It's because it's a big trigger for me, because my mother, when I was a kid, my mother would be relentless about getting her way, and she would constantly badger me until I was so exhausted I would just give in. It was her way, hell or high water. That's what happened. So when people pressure me like that, I either dissociate or like fly into a rage. So it's taken me years to work on that. But when a kid does that, it's certainly pressure and I don't like it and it's uncomfortable. I wouldn't necessarily call that manipulation because both parties know what's happening here. You're hoping to get a different answer from me, but you have to shut it down because you deserve not to be pressured. And you also don't want to teach your kid that they can pressure and then eventually it's just a matter of getting what they want. In fact, I had this issue today. He's like texting me from camp, pick me up early. I'm like, no, please. I'm like, no. And then I just don't respond. It's easier to do that via text because I can just stop responding. But like when we're face to face, it's a little more difficult. Like I said, no. So I think teaching kids to compromise one-on-one in relationships is a good skill. So I don't have a problem because my kid does that naturally. I don't have a problem negotiating with him on a lot of things. Again, unless it's like a no bargain, like it's just a rule, it's the rule. I gave you the reason for the rule. I'm not changing my mind on this. So I allow the negotiation. I allow him to speak his piece at least once. And then I'll give him an answer, or maybe we can have some dialogue about it. I think it's a good skill as long as I call him out if he starts to pressure me, right? If it feels like pressure, I'll call him out. Like when he was younger and he did that, like ask the same question repeatedly, I told him, stop pressuring me. Oh, I'm just asking you a question. I'm like, no, when you ask somebody the same question they've already answered, because you're hoping to get a different response from them, that's pressure. That's where it's not just asking a question anymore. You're pressuring them. It doesn't feel good. People don't like it. So, I mean, these are all things that have come up in our household. Anyway, so but I wanted to kind of open with that because clearly we get from negotiation to now persuasive skills to then the dark part of it, the manipulation, right? So, I mean, teaching persuasive skills is worthwhile. Kids learn persuasive writing in schools. It's good to teach kids how to speak up for themselves, self-champion. That's a big part of what I talk about on this channel, right? So I was talking about during the break when you were offline about the definition of manipulation in the book I read, the Narcissist Playbook, which is when you convince somebody else to do something against their own best interest. So what do you think about that definition first?
So my guys have been talking as you're talking, yeah. And a few things have been coming up. So the first thing that they want to acknowledge is understand when you are thinking about your role as a parent and the child's role as the child, in other lives, that role was switched. So you might have been the child, they might have been the mother, they might have been the father, they might have been the brother, you might have been married, you might have been, right? So they're saying like, sometimes when you're looking to learn in this life, you might have taken on a very difficult relationship with your child. And that might be to feel what it feels like to be on the other end. Maybe in a previous life, you were the mother, like you were father, you were child, and maybe they sort of emotionally harmed you. So they're bringing that up is like, just keep this in mind. If you have like, I feel like there's someone dealing with like extremely difficult situation. And they're like, in that situation, I think they're talking to the collective here. They're like, that might be a karmic reason why it's such a difficult relationship. So they just want to acknowledge that. But I asked them to focus on, and then they started going into Maria, you and your son. And I'm like, she doesn't want to talk about that on her YouTube live channel. But again, they're making the point of like, Maria in the previous life was the father and her son was her son. But they had a very difficult life, and they were they sold things. They were a pet, like a peddler is kind of how it's described. Yeah. And the son felt frustration because Maria was so like, this is the way we do things, was so much that way that I think they're telling me that this feels like a do-over for you and him.
Interesting.
You're like, I'm going to come through. It's going to be different this time. You know what I mean? The other thing they wanted to acknowledge before we get to the question about manipulation is they're like, when a child is looking to negotiate, they're looking to be seen. And your job as the parent is to acknowledge the humanity of the child, no matter what your response is. They're like, saying yes and saying no, it's the same response to spirit. You understand? Do you understand? They're like, it doesn't matter if you're saying yes or you're saying no. What matters is that you see the humanity in the child. You're connecting with them as a spirit and not as a lower being. Okay. That child is on your level. Yeah. Right? And they're like, and then they had a little bit, they put a little vinegar on it like they always do. They're like, when you're 85 and your child's taking care of you, think of how you talk to your child. Do you want them talking to you that way when you're 85? Probably not, right? So, okay. So let's get through the question about manipulation. It's very funny. So they have been urging me to talk a little bit more about how people can use psychic skills in their daily lives. I think it's great if you want to talk about past lives. It's really fun to channel aliens. All that's cool, right? But they're like, when it comes to your day-to-day, it's useful if you use your psychic abilities to help you in life. Mm-hmm. Scorpio and Scorpio placements are water signs. Mm-hmm. Water signs have a ton of intuition. They pick up on emotion. Therefore, they're incredibly good at what we would call manipulating.
Yeah.
What they're doing is using their psychic skills to read you. And once they've read you and they know what you want, they're able to get what they want. So the team is saying, like, we should, they're kind of being like, you should laud them. They're like, this is the brilliance of the Scorpio. This is the brilliance of the Scorpio energy, right?
Yeah.
Their ability to read. They're like, it's like they walk in the water and whoever else is in the water, they know exactly what's going on.
Yeah.
They know exactly where the tender points are, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I use this quote in my book on Scorpio kids, that Scorpio kids sense indecision like Sauron senses the One Ring. It's like, well, they know, like you just said, that resonated so hard. They know how to read you. And it's like, my kid will like stare at me and I'm like, this dude is like looking into my soul. I don't like this. Yes, this feels uncomfortable. Yeah, he's like, and they know, man, he knows who is a bad person and who is a good person. And he knows who to stay away from. I've noticed, like in his old school was like, this person is very manipulative and he would just distance himself from that person. And it's important to honor that. To your point, it's important to honor that the kids' experience, because their energy is so like unfiltered before the world gets hold of them, right? Yes. So I love that point that your guys made. It's a really good to remember. Yeah.
They also are saying it's impossible to be manipulated if you're sitting in your own power. So that's psychic speak. But what it means is when you allow yourself to be manipulated, which is a choice, by the way, when you allow that, you are allowing someone to energetically step into your space.
Right.
Right? Right. Their energy in your space. Their energy in your space cannot help you.
Right.
You also, but again, they're making me it's a choice. You're making the choice, right? So they're bringing up what your son did in that one situation. It's funny. They're like, this can be a power, so you can understand how to manipulate people. But they're like, but you also know how to not be manipulated. It goes both. It cuts both ways, right? And in this circumstance, you could feel the energy of that person trying to come in. Have you ever met someone who is a narcissist? And manipulation and narcissism, I think, go together. And you almost feel them reaching into you. It's kind of like with the Scorpio stare, it's X-ray. With narcissism, it's like it's coming in. If you've ever seen Coraline in the imagery of the hands, like, okay. So that's what they're talking about. Like, you can feel it, right? And if you are a sign, I'd say a Pisces would be extremely vulnerable.
Yeah. Well, and water also like blurs the boundaries. I've talked about that before on this channel between you and the other person. So your energy, like, if the water is not contained, your energies are going to like influence each other. Like they're going to be in your energy. And just really quick, one time I had a narcissistic person in my life who is not in my life anymore, but I all of a sudden had a spontaneous image in my head of this person with their hands around my neck. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? And I swear to you, now sitting here now, years later, I'm like, that was a warning that I needed to get this person out of my life. And it didn't happen at the time. I didn't put this person out of my life until later, but that was a warning at the time. You need to get rid of this person.
So the team wants you to talk more about this, because they're saying that like we've used the water signs as an example, but the real news is everyone is psychic. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
So everyone has the ability. So what they're saying is sort of like when it comes to manipulation, the image you got in your mind, right? They're like, these are not mistakes.
Yeah.
This can be a guide talking to you. It can be your own self being like, I don't know, right? If you're not into guide, right?
Right.
And they're just telling me to ignore these things is to ignore your nature, to ignore your psychicness. And the more you, what's the saying? What you resist persists.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sound gets louder and louder. The situations in life get more and more difficult until you're able to start identifying the signs, the breadcrumbs, the types of things.
Right.
So it's like, they're also telling me like a feeling of nausea. They're like your physical body. You're not like, why does my stomach hurt? That's so weird. Like they're like, you think of your health and your psychicness as completely separate, and they're not. He's like, how else do we communicate with you? Through thoughts, through feelings, through bodily emotions, through vision. People think that like psychicness is like, oh my God, there's Krishna coming through the sky. They're like, it's subtle.
It's like a highly developed intuition, right? It's which we all have, as you said.
We all have it. But and they're also saying like think in metaphors too. So like someone coming in and the image of someone strangling you, someone trying to strangle you. When you think of how you feel around someone too, and they say sometimes you might not, this actually came up with a friend of mine. Sometimes you don't know at the moment you're being manipulated.
Yeah.
But then they're like, pay attention to how you feel later.
Right. That's important. That's important. Because I, like in the past, I would sometimes dissociate in the moment. And after doing a post-mortem, like when I could detach, I would think, I felt completely triggered. Why? And I realized, why did I let things play out like that? Like, why did I let myself be manipulated? Like, why did I say yes when I meant to say no, when I wanted to say no? Yeah. And through trauma therapy and other things over years, I learned it's because I was dissociating outside of myself. And that's like, something I had to do when I was a kid to like, survive. So, that's, so it's hard to know sometimes in the moment what's happening. So that's my question. So what you're saying is it's our choice. We make the choice to allow ourselves to be manipulated. How do we recognize, okay, this person is trying to manipulate me? Like they're trying to get me to do something. I think that's a large part of how I would explain, like if I were explaining manipulation to my kid, who he's a Scorp and he's 14, he knows what it is pretty well. But if he didn't, I think I would explain it well. Certainly, like if you are not aware of that somebody's trying to persuade you to do something, that's clearly dark. That's clearly manipulative. It's not like asking a direct question, right? If somebody's trying to gaslight you and you're not realizing that that's what's happening, like I'll give you an example from my past, is somebody who would say one thing like, yes, I agree with you. We're going to compromise on this issue. We're going to handle things this way. And they would act completely different. And I would call them on it and say, we agreed to this. And now you're handling this like this. And they had no response. Even during therapy sessions, they would have no response. So clearly when I do the post-mortem of that dynamic, now I think this person, who is most likely a narcissist, would just tell me what I wanted to hear to get me to stop nagging, but would do whatever they wanted to do. That's clearly manipulation. At the time, I didn't know because I could not have known until it played out, right? So and that's hard to recognize because in the moment you may think, well, this person didn't hear me or didn't understand. No, I found out later they heard, they understood, they didn't care. They just wanted their way. And they didn't want me to know that all they want is their way. See, it becomes very like multi-layered. So you really have to spend a lot of energy sometimes figuring this dynamic out. And that's kind of where
so they have a few things. They have a few things to say about this. Okay. So they said in the moment, when you are in the moment with anyone else, good psychic hygiene makes a lot of sense. What's good psychic hygiene? Anytime you talk to someone, before you talk to someone, put down a grounding cord. What's a grounding cord? Envision a rock, a bowling ball, a ball of yarn, drop it to the center of the earth. Imagine that it's attached to the base of your spine. Feel the feeling of grounding before you go into any conversation. Good psychic hygiene. What does that do? It brings you into your head. It brings you into your body. The other thing they're recommending, put a nice big golden orb around you. We call this an aura, but you can just think of it as a big orange ball, right? Big gold orange ball. The purpose of this ball is to let all the good in, let all the bad stuff out, right? They're like good psychic hygiene. If you're in the middle of a conversation and you get the icks, it means something's infiltrated. And then say to yourself, where's my golden ball? Where's my grounding? In the moment. They're like, say after the fact, you forget to do all this. It gets heated with this person and you come away with it feeling the way that you felt. They're showing me like very, very easy, straightforward things to do. So like washing your hands,
Right.
like specifically washing your hands. Like there's something with the water and the cleansing of like, and then as you wash your hands, intentional being like, I want to wash this interaction off.
That makes sense. Like, well, water is very cleansing too. So that's a good,
cleansing.
right.
They're showing like
cleanses
after
the energy,
right? How they get the extra energy out. So like there. The other thing they're saying, I found this very interesting. So they're like, when someone manipulates intentionally, they're comparing it to black magic. So black magic is, okay, so there's white magic and black magic, as I understand it. White magic is working with your own energy. Black magic is using your energy plus other people's energy. It's like infiltrating, right? So like when black magic happens, understand that the way this person is functioning, it's almost like they're comparing it to how a planet forms. The energy just gets sucked up into their work, right? Because this is what they do. They're saying to depersonalize it a bit, treat it like an act of nature and not this evil person is. Do you see the difference? There's like a tornado and being like, wow, that's kind of a cool, beautiful tornado. It's also scary, but it's kind of cool. And then there's like, the tornado's coming for my house to kill me. They're two different reactions. So they're like, the first one is the one to use. So as someone does this to you, they're like laugh at it. You remember the part in Harry Potter when they're supposed to take things they're scared of and laugh at it?
Yeah.
They're saying this is a very powerful psychic tool. So so say this scary, evil, mean person that you know has manipulated you in the past comes to you and tries to do it again. They're like, just where's the person stepping out of you? Pretend you stepped out for you for a second. You're watching the scene. It's kind of funny. They're like, it's sort of funny, isn't it?
Yeah.
This person and they're trying to get at you. They're like, haha, you can't. You know what I mean? They're kind of like showing like, isn't it? And then they're also saying like, have empathy for this person. Right. This person, they're like, a tornado can't help being a tornado. Some people cannot help. They're not self-aware.
Yeah,
they don't
definitely
have that awareness.
Definitely helps to have empathy. That does not mean you have to allow that person access to you or even allow them in your life. I want to make that clear because, and I've said it before, you can unconditionally love somebody and decide, accept them as they are and decide they cannot be in your life. You cannot have them in your life.
They go, would you invite a tornado to dinner?
No.
But they're like, but you can still look at it from afar.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's pretty. That's a pretty tornado.
And you can take the lessons.
Yeah. They're like,
you can take the lessons it taught you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they're literally, they're comparing manipulation to tornado because it brings in all the available energy that you're not keeping. And they're just bringing it up into them because that's what they've known. They keep comparing it to like a scared, hurt animal and the other thing they want to mention is like certain people understand when they suck up that energy, they're sucking up energy from all kinds of crappy places that you don't want any association with, right? So it's like, they're just showing that like, it's an act of nature. It is what it is. It's not good or bad, but you have to understand and depersonalize it and just like watch it from afar, have amusement. They're like, keep your amusement, folks. Like, even if you get into it, you get sucked in. They're like, after the fact, laugh at yourself, laugh at the whole situation. Like, that was so silly. What do they think I'm going to do? You know what I mean? Like, they're showing people really taking it to heart. Like, oh, I can't have a boundary. Oh, why does this always happen to me? They're like,
you can have a boundary. You absolutely can. You have the choice. Yeah. It's so funny because before I forget this thought, I want to mention to you, the way you define black magic, that makes so much sense because narcissists, that's what they do is they use other people's energy for their supply. Like that's part of what it is to be a narcissist is that you are so insecure. You cannot be by yourself. You cannot go inside and self-reflect. You can't go there. It's too damaging. So they look for the supply from other people constantly and they'll use up supply. And I was listening to this video earlier today about a therapist about how supply gets stale. They may use somebody for supply for months or years. And the supply gets boring. The supply gets stale. Then we'll go off and look for new supply and use people's energy. And you have to protect your energy. That is one of the main things that Amy and I are always talking about. You have to protect your own energy. Do what you need to do that for yourself, for your kids, for the people who depend on you. You have to I decided that a long time ago. I have to prioritize my health. I have to. My kid needs me. I have a lot of things I still want to get done. As a Capricorn moon, I have a very strong sense of time and the passage of time, and I want to make sure I have a lot of time on this earth to get everything done that I want to do. And I can't do that if I allow other people's energy into mine all the time, and if I allow other people to use my energy. So really important point that is connected to our topic for today.
They're also saying, if you're aware that you've been manipulated, you're further along than many people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's hard. If you are reparenting yourself, if you, as a kid, you were taught not to trust your own intuition and you're learning how to do that as an adult, it's challenging. It's tough. Like, you're not alone in that. That is a big part of it, is to realize when you're being manipulated, when it becomes more than just somebody standing up for themselves and trying to persuade you of something. Yeah. And to do that, you need to get, like we're talking about, you need to get detachment, which interestingly, I have a video prepared for you guys. It's going to go live in a couple of days on detachment, how to emotionally detach from anyone, which we talked a little bit about last month too, which is really important because you have to get that detachment to see things more clearly sometimes, because we're talking about when you're in it, and you're not, maybe you weren't great at protecting your energy, or the other person's energy is interfering too much with yours. You need to step back, get that detachment to see what's really going on. I have a lot of examples of that we don't have time to go over today. A ton of examples where as soon as I got some detachment, everything fell into place. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this cannot continue like this.
Yes.
So yeah.
This aggression will not stand. The other thing they say is the second you realize you've been manipulated, you've been released from the manipulation.
Yeah.
It will stay. You're going to stay in the tornado until you realize that you've been manipulated. And they're like, immediately the second you had that self-realization, you have been released. So they're saying, they're just encouraging you guys, additional admonishments of yourself are not helpful.
Right.
They're like, self-awareness is enough for now.
Right.
Right? That's powerful, because we feel so bad, right? We feel bad then.
Yeah.
We're tying emotion to them, and they're like, they're not saying it's not helpful to do that work. They're just saying it is not necessary. The second you realize you've been manipulated, you have no longer been manipulated. You've been released from the manipulation. You realize that you are free. They're like, you don't have to go back and unpack it unless you want to. Exactly. I think that's very important. They keep bringing this up. They're like, you do not need to be, because I think they're fearing a lot. People who tend to get manipulated a lot, I think, are very hard on themselves once they've realized it's happened. Yes. And they're like, this is not necessary. They're like, isn't it bad enough being in the tornado? You're going to put yourself in your own tornado? Mm-hmm. Not necessary. Not necessary.
That's right. Yeah, that's the power right there, is to realize what's happening. It's like, now that you realize it, you can do something about it. Now you can decide for yourself what steps to take, like how to protect yourself. Right.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, that's a big part of it. So that's recognizing what's happening is so important. So recognizing someone's attempts to gaslight you, like what is real, what is not. That's, man, if you have any like Neptune contacts, that's going to come up like in a relationship, because things are going to get cloudy and fogged up and you're not going to know what is true and what it's not. That is not a comfortable place to be. So,
it's interesting. They're talking, they have, I guess you would say this is an unpopular view of gaslighting. So they're saying gaslighting has sort of, because it's been identified as a thing, people have given a lot of energy to the concept of gaslighting. And they're just making me understand that, like, sometimes there is actually no intention to gaslight. And the times that there is, I think making me think that it's rarer than it is. Does that make sense? They're making me feel like we have our own perceptions of reality, and they're just showing they're just showing like different people having different versions of reality.
Right.
And gaslighting, I think the message I'm getting is like, sometimes this is not helpful to say I've been gaslit, because then what you're doing then is assigning blame. And then you're also assigning a victim. There's a victimhoodness with gaslighting.
That's fair.
That they are saying, they're not saying don't do it. They're just saying, be aware that when you're saying you are gaslighting me, first you're lobbing something over to their side of the court, which might not have come from their side of the court in the first place. You're returning a serve perhaps you shouldn't have returned, right? And they're also making me feel like you need to unpack some stuff, right? In terms of like what, you know what I mean? They're like, if you are being honest in your communications, there's really nothing to fear with being gaslit. Because they're saying, they're making me feel like, again, like that's a sneaky one. I feel like they're showing me a bit of a warning around that term specifically, which I find very interesting because it's very much in the common, culture.
Yeah, it's certainly a term that's overused a lot, I think, and I see different definitions of it. I mean, it's when people use the term gaslighting, they're meaning some type of manipulation, some type.
Yeah.
Intentional lying to making somebody question their reality. But to that point, to your point, you have to be really strong and powerful in what your experience, like the truth of your experience. So that's the thing. And usually when you call other people out on gaslighting, they're not going to admit it anyway. Because especially if they're somebody with narcissistic or sociopathic tendencies, they're not going to admit that to you. They're just going to say, no, you're crazy. So I think your energy is better. I think that's correct. Your energy is really better spent working on yourself, protecting your energy, working on your boundaries, making sure your boundaries are ironclad, and being sure about your own reality so that when somebody questions it, you can say, well, that was not my experience, or I had a different experience. I had a different viewpoint. It is possible. I mean, I've come across a lot of dynamics where I'm not sure that the person was intentionally lying. It could be that they misremembered.
Yeah.
Some people, not everybody, some people diagnosed with ADHD have like holes in their memory.
Yes.
And they'll fill it up with what they think happened or what they wanted to happen.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're not intentionally lying. They honestly have a memory of something that really didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And you're going to think you're lying. And I don't want to excuse anybody who's intentionally lying, but it is possible that somebody misremembered. I've come across that and I'm like, why would you lie about that? That's something dumb to lie about. What's the point? Yeah. And through an exploration, I came to the conclusion that maybe this person wasn't intentionally being deceptive. Maybe they actually remembered it like that, but I know it didn't happen like that. I mean, that's possible. That's going to drive you nuts though. So my point is just be certain in your truth.
Yes. Okay. So they want to talk about a few things. So, I'll tell a little story. They're like, talk about what happened. Okay. So I was in a fight with the Hubs, as one does.
Oh yeah.
And, at the end of the day, he's like, I can't believe you said what you said to me. I'm like, well, what did I didn't say anything. And he's like, no, you said this. And here's the thing. I didn't say that, but I thought it. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it. And because we are connected and we have one mind, there's one universal mind, he heard it. I didn't have to say it.
That's
funny. Thought it.
That's funny.
Right? So the team thought that was funny because I think when we're in interactions, sometimes something's going on in our head, but we self-edit. Yeah. And that's right, as it should be, right? Because you want to be in control. But but thinking a certain emotion and saying something else is lying.
That's fair. That's fair.
So they're kind of making, they were like playing a little joke. Fair. And the other thing I think it's just something that I want you all to sit with again, because we are all psychic, right?
Yeah.
So even if you're like saying something nice and saying something rude and evil in your head, the person might perceive the rude and evil thing. They might not even hear what you're saying, right?
Right.
So I think they're bringing this up is they're showing so much miscommunication along these lines because they're like, this is not authentic relationship. They're bringing this back to the start of the conversation. A child wants to be seen. Mm-hmm. Humans want to be seen. They need to be seen. This is how they're just saying, like, this is how healing happens. Being seen, being seen, being seen. They keep saying that. So anytime you're trying to communicate with anyone, the grounding is great. The orange glow is great. That's great for protection. They're like, but when it comes to you authentically expressing yourself and seeing the other person, they're like, start with seeing the other person first before you launch into whatever you want to launch into. Take a second and try to see them. So psychics know how to read energy, right? But you all do too. Right. You grounded yourself. All you have to do is ground them. What comes up when you ground them?
Right.
What does their grounding cord look like? Is it black? Are they pissed? Is it red? Are they like, what's coming out of that grounding board, right? You can actually take a second and view the interaction before you view the interaction. And it's, the guides are sort of like, they think, okay, I think part of this they find amusing because we as humans have all the skills we need to understand how a conversation is going to go before it even happens. And we don't use any of it.
Yeah.
Instead, what we do is waste our time complaining, envisioning unhelpful things, right? Right? Instead of taking a moment, reading the person, reading ourselves, reading the situation, we get so clouded in our emotions, we forget the power we have to read. You can read any situation before, during, and after it happens. And we never use any of those skills, myself included. We never use any of those skills. We keep our powers on a box and we use it like tornadoes. We use it for our own means, right? For our own needs. So shouldn't be like, oh, it's not a wagging of a finger. They find it amusing. This is amusing. You have all the skills you need to make sure that you're not manipulated, that you're not gaslit, that all these, that you're conscious in your communications and you're authentic and you don't use them.
Yeah. And that's part of what us parents are trying to teach kids. Like we're trying to do the conscious communication. So it's not just a bunch of directives. Like I teach my kid how to think, not what to think, right? That's what I'm ultimately trying to do. Yes, I want him to make good decisions, but he's going to have to make those decisions when he's out of the house. I'm not around. So I have to guide him in his thinking, right, about how to get to the good decisions and possible consequences.
They say the future of parenting is you will understand how that child is teaching you.
Yeah.
And you will understand how to learn from that child. They're like, parenting is no different than teaching. The teacher and the student creates the teaching. The parent and the child creates the parenting. Parents now think they parent. They do not. It's them plus the child creates the parenting.
Right.
There is an equal footing and that we are missing.
Right. So I have a good friend, Laura Reagan, who I'm going to be interviewing soon on the show, and we're going to be talking about stuff from like an Aquarian point of view, because she's a sociologist. So this could be very interesting. That's exactly what she says. She's a parenting coach, and she says you are co-creating a reality with your kids. That's what she calls it. You are co-creating the reality. It's not just you dictating to the kids. You are co-creating it. And you are inspiring. The way you communicate with the kids also inspires them to communicate consciously and openly with you. So that's what I thought of when you just made that statement. That's so true. I mean, and parents can accept it or not, but it's the truth. I mean, I've talked to parents who said, no, my kid just needs to do what he's told. Well, but the truth is you're co-creating that. So that's what you're co-creating somebody who's going to be compliant, who may not be able to stand up for themselves, who may not recognize when they're being manipulated because they weren't taught to do that. They weren't guided to protect themselves, protect their energy. So
they're saying too, like, if parenting is easy for you, it's probably not good for the child. That the parenting that's difficult for you likely will benefit the child. So they're telling me to tell a story. I met a woman who worked with blind mothers. And the mothers would put the baby in a bassinet and like leave the child there. Because if you're a blind child, you're not crawling around. Like they have to be encouraged to crawl around, right? But the mothers of the blind children, it was easier for them to leave the kid in the bassinet. Like, I get it. I totally understand. Like, you want to do your thing. You just want to leave them in the bassinet. And they really had to work with these moms to be like, no, you have to like take the baby out of the bassinet, encourage the baby to explore its environment. It can't see, but it has other senses. So this is a pain in the butt for a mother. You want to do your laundry. You got all the stuff that you think is more important, but it's more difficult for you to work with a child. But this ultimately will benefit the blind child, right? You need to work with a child to understand how it can, explore its environment in a healthy and safe way. So difficult for the parent, good for the child. So they're just saying like, if it feels too easy, my rule, my way, the highway, and they're pointing their finger at me here. Like, they're like, if it feels too easy, it's likely not benefiting your child, right? That's unfortunate. And they're comparing it to the gym. They're like, the gym isn't easy, but there are benefits of the gym, right?
Yeah.
There,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. No, that's true. It's easier to be like, no, you're just going to do what I say and that's it. I don't want to hear it. Don't talk back, right? Air quotes. Don't ask me questions. It's harder to do the conscious communication. It's harder, but it's worthwhile. And, you know, if you have a strong-willed child like Amy and I do, I mean, that's actually a good thing because that child is going to be more able to self-champion, stand up for themselves, protect their boundaries when they're adults. I already see it. Like my son is really good now about boundaries with a phone use, like not feeling like he has to text and reply to every notification. And I have to guide him, I had to guide him and teach him that because I want him to do that for himself when he's on his own. So, because I mean, look, you really can't avoid the phones. You can decide not to have them at home, but nothing preventing your kids from getting them when they leave the house. So, yeah, important stuff. So back to our original question, when to recognize that you're being manipulated. Part of it is like an intuitive sense, right? Being pressured is one thing. You can clearly state, hey, you're pressuring me, stop pressuring me. I'm not going to engage anymore with this because it feels bad because you're pressuring me. Okay. And then another thing is recognizing you're being manipulated, because that may not be apparent, like what we're talking, all the things we talked about. So it's not, I don't think it's a cut and dry, certainly not a cut and dry definition.
No.
Number one, like Amy said, pay attention to how you are feeling. I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. Excuse me. Pay attention to how you're feeling. If you're feeling bad, something's going on, right? You need to figure out what that is. So I love that, like you have the power to recognize that, but you have to pay attention to yourself, what's going on with you and your energy.
Yeah. And it's, a lot of people don't do this. Again, if I have a meeting with someone and we have lunch, and after that meeting I walk away and my stomach hurts, do I immediately think, well, that person caused my stomach to hurt? No, I think I'm not eating at that place again. Mm-hmm. What the guides are encouraging is like, no, think about that person that you had lunch with. What were you talking about? Mm-hmm. How did you feel when you left? Mm-hmm. The stomach is the emotional center, right? You know your chakras, or you work with the chakra system, right? So it's like, what emotion did they trigger in you? Was it people pleasing? Was it, did you want them to like you? Did you feel like they asked you for something along our topic, asked you for something you feel uneasy providing? They're like, start paying attention. When someone calls you, does your ear hurt? Does your head hurt? Like the body will speak to you. All your psychic senses will be speaking to you. But if you're not paying attention, you can't pick up the phone. Like, and they're like, so many people are not paying attention. Not all, but a lot of us, right? And then we go immediately, well, I'll just take some Pepto-Bismol, stomachache gone, situation gone, right? So they're just saying like, before and after you talk or interact with anybody, take 2 seconds, put down a grounding cord, maintain your objectivity, your amusement. After, how do I feel? Right? They're showing me such resistance to this because a lot of people have not asked themselves this question ever.
That's crazy.
They've not asked it ever. And if they feel like if they start, oh my God, the tears will never stop. But that's like the guides say, this is the beginning of learning. Like they're sort of like, and now we can begin.
No, it's true. Like I see so many people completely burnt out, especially women, like completely burnt out. And I'm like, stop. Like I've had this conversation with other moms. I'm like,
stop.
You don't have to say yes. I know I need to be better about, saying no. I said, you don't have to do everything. Like, and a lot of the times this was how they were conditioned as kids, like be compliant, like be pleasing. That was me as a kid. Like, man, I couldn't say no to anything. I was not allowed. And as I've said on this channel multitude of times, it led me to have very poor boundaries as an adult to my detriment. And I remember specifically, like around the time I mentally woke up and thought, why am I saying yes to this stuff I don't want? I have the power. These people don't have the power over me. I do. Right. And that's, so hopefully people get to that point at some point. There are a lot of people that don't. A lot of people that don't get to that point and just get mentally and physically ill when they get burnt out.
It's a really nice message they're giving when you say that. They go, the things that you guys are fearing is not as bad as you think that they are. So they're like, the consequence of saying no is not as bad as you think it is.
Exactly.
The consequence of this is not as bad as you think it is. They're just saying, they're like, if you could only see what's on the other side of this wall you've built up so high, you would know that it's really not that high. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was talking to, I had a coach for work, and I was telling her how many times I've taken on different positions just because I like the challenge, but that I was getting burnt out by this. And she goes, well, saying no is also a challenge. And I was like, and then I was enlightened. I was like,
yeah,
yes, it is.
It's true.
That's an appeal. So like, think of your personality, right? I like a challenge. Okay, then saying no is a challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're a Sag. You like your freedom. Saying no will protect. Well, they don't have problems saying no. Whatever. We should just skip Sag.
I know.
You know what I mean? Like, think about like, how can I? They're saying, think about yourself and your personality. How you can encourage yourself to be self-aware and all these things. Mm-hmm. They're also saying something interesting, which hasn't come up yet. They go, if you need help, you need to just ask for it. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? That's just like, I used to call it writing a psalm. If you've ever read the Psalms, they're like, oh Lord, I am so screwed. You know what I mean? It's very much like writing a psalm, like write a psalm in your heart and just be like, can someone help? Can something help me? That you don't have
ask
to pray
for help.
To anybody. You can just say, can something help? Is something available to help?
Oh my gosh.
The second you ask for help, they're showing a dark room. This is cool.
Yeah.
They're showing a dark room, and when you ask for help, it shows a light bulb coming on. It's cool. Right? So they're like, we're here to help you. If you need help.
Oh my gosh. Let me tell you this amazing serendipity that happened to me last night. First of all, I've been doing what you said. And like when I say my prayers, like a good Catholic every night, I say my prayers and I ask my spirit guides for help. Like, can you please help me with this? Can you please help me with this? And last night I went to this, I don't even think I told my viewers yet that that's a whole nother topic, is I'm doing this TED talk on teens and boundaries at the end of the summer in Denver. I'll have more info on that later. But we had a meet and greet with the TED Talk people locally here in DC last night. And I was so I went and I was thinking, oh, I'm tired. I just want to stay home, put my feet up. Like, no, you're going to go, even though you don't know anybody well, and you're going to mingle, right? Like, all right, mingle. So I go, long story short, and I decide to sit at a table with two other ladies, and one is like very attractive and very glamorous. And I'm here like with like my frizzy hair and stuff and no makeup like usual. And I'm like, okay. Anyway, long story short, the three of us are talking. The one lady is like, she's a divorced mom like me with kids, our kids' age, more or less, young teenagers, and wrote a memoir. It's done, and she's kind of feeling very vulnerable about putting it out there, and she needs help self-publishing. I'm like, well, I've self-published like 8 books. I can help you with this. And then the other lady at the table does websites, and she's like, I usually do websites for authors and publishers. And I said, well, I'm revamping my website right now and I need help with that. She goes, I'm your person. I'm like, look at that. I cannot believe this.
Look at that.
Like, you're helping me, I'm helping her. I'm like, and I told anyway, so long story short, we kept saying, oh, we're so glad we sat at this table. Like, it was crazy. Like, I mean, she's like, I needed help self-publishing. I don't know where to start. I'm like, I can help you with this. I can point you in the right. I can point you in the right direction. I can tell you what resources most helped me. Yeah. Right. And I can answer any questions that you have. And the other lady was like, yeah, I do websites. I can completely help you with that. I'm like, fantastic. We need to talk.
You can thank your guides, because another way to get more help is to acknowledge the help that you've received. So on the flip side of asking is gratitude. Right. I love giving my spirit guides gifts. And if you don't know what I mean, pretend like you're giving them like a bouquet of roses. Oh. Or a fresh loaf of bread. I don't know what the personality of your guides are. Mine are happy when I give them like honey and flour. Like, you know what I mean? Like a box of chocolates. Like, think how you would thank someone in real life. You would write a note. You can write them a note.
Yeah.
It's gratitude.
That's cool.
It's gratitude.
Totally.
Like, yeah.
So it was really like, it was a good decision for me to go out last night.
Good for you. Right? I'm happy. It's good. I'm happy for you.
So, so it was just interesting because I thought of you and that happened. I'm like, cannot believe this happened. You got the help. It's so crazy. Yeah. So this, to our point here, be open right? Be grateful.
Yes.
Be unapologetically you. Stand in your own power.
Yes.
I'm working on a masterclass on boundaries for my Patreon subscribers, man. So this is going to be, I'm going to have a lot of info on boundaries for you guys very shortly. So yeah, all important stuff. We are coming right about in an hour. I want to make sure, Amy, that I ask you if there's anything else you want to add, anything else your guides you want to add from your guides.
Anything else?
Okay. A lot of good stuff today.
They just keep focusing on the child. This is funny. So they go, the child has been in connection with all that is a lot more recently than you have.
Yeah.
So they're like, just remember that. Just remember that. Mm-hmm. They've come from the ether. And they've come from what that place feels like energetically. So you might want to listen to what they're saying, and you might want to pay attention to the things that they're paying attention to, because there might be more wisdom in that than how you live your life. Woo, yeah. They can really drop the mic sometimes.
But it's true that, like, and I've said this before on this channel multiple times, kids can teach us stuff. We can learn from kids. It's wrong to think, because I'm older and I have more experience, which you do have more life experience this go around, right? I know better than you. Yeah, in a lot of ways, yes. But in some ways, no. So, and I love what your guides were saying earlier in the session on, when your kids are asking you repeatedly the same questions or badgering you, they want to be seen. So just taking a moment, acknowledge, hey, I hear you. I see this is important to you. Maybe I can't address this right now. That's fine. As you and I have said before, you don't have to give 100% access 100% of the time. You just can't. No. You're human. No. Hey, but you can say, I hear you. I can see this is important for you. We can talk about this in half an hour, or when I am done what I'm doing, or when I have more, time and I can focus on you and on this question. Yeah. So it is important that that's the message kids get. Like, I see you, I hear you, I see this is important to you. Maybe I can't address it right now, but I know that you want to talk about this. We will get to that. Like, I've had to do that. Like, we'll talk about this when I see you later today. Okay. Yeah. I love it. To right now. So yeah, good stuff.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for coming. It's always great to hear from you and your guys. This is kind of an evolving topic, but one I get a lot of questions about. So I really appreciate your input on it. And we will be back next month. Oh my gosh. I am out of pocket starting July 23rd until like the end of September. I'm traveling and doing other kinds of stuff, but hopefully we can possibly get a session in mid-July next month. And if not, we will figure something out. But thank you guys very much for your attention. Thank you, Amy, and your guides. Really excited to talk to you today, and we'll be back with more content soon. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Safe.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, stream finished. All right.